All right. Welcome to another episode of Unfiltered Fridays here on the Consistency Corner podcast. I still don't know, you guys, if I'm supposed to say Fridays with an S or singular. I haven't decided. I think I say it opposite each time, but either way, welcome back. Glad you're here. And I'm excited to have Heather Simpson on the podcast today. And Heather and I connected through some mutual friends after I had seen her calendar planning method on Instagram using calendars and post-it notes. And if y'all don't know me, I'm obsessed with calendars. At one time in my office, I think I had 7 different calendars and brought home another one. And my husband was like, "You don't need another calendar. Stop. What are we doing?" But I was very intrigued with Heather's method. And so I reached out to some of our mutual friends and said, "Hey, I want to talk to Heather. Will you introduce me?" And our good friend Madeline introduced us. And she's here today to share with us about annual planning and the post-it note method and how post-its can maybe help us get a handle on our plans for next year. And this is the time of year to do it. So Heather, welcome to the show. Other than being a planner extraordinaire, as I know you on the internet, tell us a little bit about you and your business journey.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. My business journey is long and windy, like a lot of your listeners probably. I have multiple businesses that I run in the planning and consulting world. My business called She Leads Me is where I work with women primarily in helping them build their businesses through things like strategic annual planning around this time of year, VIP days and whatnot, retreats and so on and stuff too. And then I also have a women's co-working space that I'm sitting inside right now that I also run. And on top of having the multiple businesses, I'm a mom of 3 and just have a very full life.
Well, and being that you have a full life, you run multiple businesses, you have multiple kids, you have to be good at planning. And I'm
Yes.
sure that's part of why you have a, loyal following of people that lean on you for that because you figured out what works. So talk to me a little bit about that, like those VIP days and the annual planning process. Because if you guys follow Heather on Instagram or you've seen any of her clients, our mutual friend Kelsey is I think, first person I saw that you do this with. You get your post-it notes out and you got the calendar on the wall. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah. Well, everybody's business has so many different facets to it, right? And in the beginning, we're wearing all of the hats for those different facets. And so I really love the concept of working with post it notes because they're movable. Just like a lot of things in our lives and in our schedules, we're constantly moving and shifting things around. Similar
Mhm.
with planning, whenever we put down a plan on paper, it's rare that it actually goes according to plan. So the post-it notes actually help our subconscious see the solutions around things instead of the problems because we can just literally lift it up and stick it to a new spot as opposed to scribbling out or erasing. And you kind of see like the remnants of the quote unquote failed attempts of planning before. And post-it notes also become very helpful because we can utilize different colors for the different hats that we wear when we're running our businesses or managing different projects or just having various different things within our lives that we have to juggle day to day, week to week, month to month. And so post-it notes give us the freedom and the flexibility to be effective planners, but also have the fluidity of being humans in a very busy world and being able to maneuver those things as well. And it's a big hit, as you have mentioned, and as people see, and they adopt that into a lot of different areas in their life. And so when we sit down to do a VIP day, we really look at all the different buckets that we're working with the individual. Do
Mhm.
these people have a side hustle with their full-time job in place? Are they starting a new business? Do they have children at home? Do they have pets at home? Like, what are the different facets of their life? And how can we work with the natural flow of their life and utilize something as simple as a post-it note to help that feel like it has the flexibility that life just needs and that also has the flow that it needs as well.
Yeah. One of the things you said about being able to have fluidity and flexibility in the plan and change our minds. And I think a lot of people get sometimes paralyzed with planning because they're like, I don't know steps 1 through 10, so I'm not gonna plan at all. Where, like, even if you plan steps 1 through 10 and steps 3 through 10 change, the fact that you wrote it out got your
Mhm.
brain thinking enough to, like, figure out the right steps, don't you think?
Absolutely. Reverse engineering is a big part of our process. And a lot of people talk about that online, but not knowing what that is and actually putting it into practice, it can feel really unattainable. When
Mhm.
the reality is, it can be really simple when you just start with, well, what do I want the outcome to be? And maybe I don't physically know what the outcome can be, but how do I want to feel when I reach that outcome? And we
Mhm.
start somewhere. We start with some knowing. And then from there, we go, okay, if I want to feel at peace, let's say, because right now I feel super chaotic and sporadic, and I don't know up from down. I haven't had a day off. I don't like everything just feels out of my control, and I
Mhm.
want to feel peace. Then what do we need to do a step back from peace? Okay, well, we probably need to be utilizing some type of schedule. Okay, well, what do we start with? Well, let's start with the things that are easily like anchored parts. My kids are in school from this time to this time. My
Mhm.
husband works from this time to this time. I have this standing meeting every single week. And we just start to work backwards from there,
Mhm.
aka reverse engineering, and work with the knowns that we can find and just get curious about then the different solutions that we can then have thereafter.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty freeing process when you actually just get started and don't get hung up in like how to do it perfectly or what color post-it note do I need to be using for this. Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And
Post-its, I mean, I would imagine, like, part of that is project planning, but it's also, like, theme days and batching and using your brain in creative ways so that you're more efficient and planning
Mhm.
all of those things out, I would imagine, to really help eliminate some of the decision fatigue that we can get on a day-to-day when we're wearing so many hats.
Yeah. And you brought up Kelsey, and she's a prime example of this. Like, introducing this into her business was a game changer for her, where we could
Mhm.
actually sit down and look at, okay, you have a very full schedule. You are a very in demand, amazing photographer. You are writing a book. There are so many different things that are within your realm and your scope that if you tried to do every single one of those things every single day, you would feel like you're getting nowhere.
Yeah.
Instead of taking focused days where you have a day for administrative tasks, a day for creativity or photo shoots in her case, right? Um, and it works across all industries, but
Mhm.
really breaking out themed days, like you mentioned, where then we're able to make more headway on a project. We're able to put focused efforts and guardrails on our days and then our times during the day so that
Mhm.
we feel like we're making momentum and we're not just spinning in the same place over and over and over again.
Yeah. And coming from, if you've been in a corporate environment and you move into entrepreneurship, it can be so difficult to, like, work within the boundaries of time. And I definitely see two ends of the spectrum. I see, like, I'm going to stick to the 9 to 5. I'm going to stick to the 9 to 5. But then, like, I feel really constrained because I can't fit it all in the 9 to 5. And then I see the, like, well, I'm just going to work all the time, and then you're burnt out because you haven't planned for rest or downtime or, rejuvenating after you have a really big creative session. So I would imagine this kind of plans that out ahead of time, just like a meal plan maps things out ahead of time. So then you just follow the plan.
Exactly. And when we actually sit down and do our annual planning within our VIP days with our clients, we start with your time first. So,
Mhm.
what are the priorities for you as an individual, for your family, for your relationship? For me and my family, we have a flow that we now are very familiar with. We're a
Mhm.
blended family. Two of the three kids with us live full time. One of the three kids lives very part time with us and lives in another state. We have a very, if we just planned day to day, we would never see our kids. We would never be able to see extended family members. Like, we would never be able to plan to get all the things done that are important to us if we didn't look ahead. And
Mhm.
so when we do business planning, it's no different. So when I sit down to do my plan, I start with me and my husband first. I'm like, okay, what do we have coming up? Him and I always take a trip every single February together. No questions asked. That's our anniversary. That's our time. We have a very full life, like I mentioned. And so we put that on the calendar first. I schedule everything else around it.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter, who's a senior this year, we're entering into a lot of lasts with her. But for the last 7 years, she's been in competitive cheer. That has a very time intensive season that we have to work around.
Mm-hmm.
We have different time periods where we know kid number 3 is going to be with us for certain holidays. We're coordinating with different of our, former spouses. There's a lot of things that we're juggling. And if we don't sit down and do that, then none of those things happen. So we
Yeah.
always start with that. We know what our priorities are for ourselves. And then from there, I can go into working with the individual businesses and build out plans around that so that that stuff doesn't get passed over. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where we start with everybody else too, is we start with you. Where do you need your time? What's important to you? What's a non-negotiable? And then we build around that instead of building the business first and then try to fit you in.
Yes, because I think often it's like, okay, well, what's your revenue plan? Okay, great. We've come up with a revenue plan. Now, what's your, launch plan to hit that? Or what offers are you going to be marketing to hit that? But if you don't take into account your life and you plan a launch like during spring break, or you, like in your case, crazy cheer season, then you're going to like drown, and
Mhm.
you're the business owner. You
Mhm.
get to pick the dates, you get to pick the launches. And yes, there are some things that we can't control. We can't control when Black Friday is. If you're an accountant, you can't control when tax day is. Like, yes, we
Sure.
know those things, but then you can design a schedule that works with that and still honors your energy and your family and your priorities.
Absolutely. And it's Unfiltered Friday, so I feel like I can say this. A lot of us call ourselves the CEO of our business, but we're not actually operating that way. If you
Mhm.
look at your behaviors and if you were doing what you're doing kind of scattered and chaotic in an actual CEO position, you would be fired. So you really need to have a good hard look at yourself and be like, am I actually acting like a CEO? Because CEOs, they control how the year goes. They control the output that is happening. And we have just as much power to do that, if not even more so, because there's a lot of flexibility when we are the only person working within our business or with some part-time support or full-time support or VAs or whatever. And
Mhm.
so we really have to adopt that mindset in our Unfiltered Friday episode here, where we have to get real with ourselves and look at, planning ourselves first also isn't planning vacation every single month, probably, right? Like if we want to be hitting certain things and we're going after certain goals, sometimes that may mean that we do have sacrifice as well. But we want to make sure that when we look at the overall portion of the year, that they're in that 12-month period, you can find balance. It's not heavily weighed one side or the other.
Yeah. And I would imagine in planning your time, at thinking about yourself as a CEO, time to work on the business and not just in the business, because
Mm-hmm.
client work can suck up all your time if you let it, especially if you're in a space where you're scaling and you're adding support and you're growing and you're in demand. But even like admin stuff that doesn't actually move the needle or help you, get to the next level can eat up all your stuff if you
Mm-hmm.
don't make time for that, like visioning and planning. And as we're talking today about annual planning, my mentor recently has been talking a ton about 5-year plans. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like thinking about a 5-year plan, that's not a 30-minute activity.
Mm-hmm.
That's a like several hours activity. Like, let me really get in and ideate and give myself some space. But if we're not planning for that, then we'll never do it. And then we're just like on the hamster wheel, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I the process that I take my clients through works in a couple of different ways. We plan in advance for the entire year in a lot of the big things, but then we're
Mhm.
always doing the detailed work at least 1 quarter ahead of time, sometimes
Mhm.
two, depending upon the scope of the work. So if you have like a big, massive launch that you need like a 12-week runway for, you're going to be doing some planning over 2 quarters as opposed to just one. So
Yeah.
right now, as of the time of this recording, we're in the month of November. My Q1 is already planned, and I am starting to work on my Q2 plan for my businesses.
Mhm.
And it's because those little details and those things, like balancing out how we do the day-to-day work with the future planning work while also looking at the bigger picture and the vision that's pulling us forward and where we want to go, it's impossible to do on the fly in day to day. You
Mhm.
have to be looking ahead, and you have to be creating space in the container to be able to have that in your future. And if you're going 1 week at a time, you're just not going to be able to get there in the time frame that you need to.
Mhm.
Similarly, why we don't just plan the details of the entire year in advance and we only look at 1 quarter at a time, there's a lot of information that comes at you in your business every single day, like we're talking about. And you
Mhm.
need to be able to have that flexibility to make different decisions in order to work with the current landscape of the economy, in order to work with new buyer spending patterns right now with inflation as high as it is. There's a lot of different nuances that can come up. And so we need to have that flexibility in the hard details, but have room for the entire plan. So we
Yeah.
use a mix of long-term planning with more shorter-term planning. And when I say shorter term, it is by quarter, to be able to execute that and be able to have room for those 5-year plans and those goals and be able to move the needle forward in the ways that we intentionally want to.
Yeah, and creating those quarterly plans when you have a year and a 5-year roadmap becomes more strategic and more intentional. And so then
Mhm.
every quarter, we're not just moving to try to get to California, but we know that we're actually going to Los Angeles. And so like we're headed in the right direction and we've got right mile markers along the way. You know, I'm curious to see either your own in your own business or some of your clients, like the difference between planning on your own and having facilitated planning. And I know I can speak to like when you have someone to hold you accountable, it makes a big difference. And
Yeah.
it brings ideas out and thoughts out that like you just weren't going to come up with on your own, or it can help you get started when you were just like paralyzed to even begin. But can you talk a little bit about some of your clients and the transformations that you've seen when they committed to facilitated planning?
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody that's listening here started their business because of an energy level that they get when they work within their zone of genius, right?
Mhm.
When they find that brilliant thing that makes them tick, that gets them so pumped and excited. For me, that's strategic planning. And I say strategic planning, and there's probably some people that like hopefully haven't tuned out because they're like, this sounds so boring and so structured. And like, no, I do not want this. But similarly to like your analogy of like the map, and like, we're not just going to California, we're going to LA. We also get to pick our playlist along the way. Like, it could be really fun. We can add a lot of like energy and excitement to it. And that's what I bring to the table, or somebody like me brings to the table. Strategy is my thing that lights me up, that gets me so excited. And so when I come into the room and bring my energy and we pair that with the brilliance and the energy of you and your unique thing, like
Mhm.
that's where there's just all of this really cool fodder and like stickiness that can create something new. And
Mhm.
I heard an analogy once that I've used over and over again, and you maybe have heard it too, but even the world's best hairdressers have a blind spot when they go cut their own hair.
Mhm.
You can be brilliant and incredible and amazing at your craft and what you do. And we all always have our own blind spots. And so having not only accountability, but other people that just are really skilled in the various different things that you may need, right? Like, we hire VAs, we hire copywriters, we hire design experts, we hire people to help us kind of uncover the full potential of what it is that we're doing in business. And strategy is just as important as all of those beautiful physical things that you may see, because it's the basis and the foundation for everything else that's to come with that. So I
Mhm.
see a lot of revival that comes with clients, because oftentimes when we're getting ready to plan the next year, people can be pretty burnt out on the current path that they're on.
Yeah.
And so it's an energy boost and drive to get them excited and charged up again about their business and see what's possible and the potential that's there. Because working together with teams of people just, always brings out more, because we're limited. We have our thing, and we add other awesome, amazing, brilliant people in with it. It just becomes even better and better.
Yeah. I am curious if in the entrepreneur space, you see a lot of people talking about neurodivergence and ADHD. And I don't know where I read the statistic, but like 3% of the population has ADHD and like 29% of entrepreneurs have ADHD. So it's like it's more prevalent in the entrepreneur space. So how do you combat somebody who feels like I might feel restricted by a plan, or I feel boxed in with a plan, or my brain isn't able to follow a plan? Like how do you work with somebody that struggles with that?
I think then just we go back to like, well, what do you really want? Do you
Mhm.
want a part-time side hustle thing that then generates part-time side hustle income? Or do you want this to be your main thing? Do you want to, some people want to make like their mark on the world and have this iconic thing that they're building that is just them. If you can't get over the fact that it takes hard work and structure to do the thing that you want to do, then you're probably in a different category than like a lot of the people that I work with, where it's like, this is my full time thing, my full focus thing. I want to be known for this thing, because greatness requires that.
Yeah.
And when we look at anything great in the world, right? Athletes are a prime example of that. The
Mhm.
people that are the best, that people want to watch, that are well known, they have structure, they have discipline, they
Yeah.
have parameters, they have days where they do the things that they don't want to do, and they do them anyway. And
Yeah.
so we have to have a reality check with ourselves to understand like there is sacrifice that comes with that level of thing. And if you don't want that, that's fine, but we have to readjust our expectations of what then is the reality, because that's often where people get dissatisfied, where
Mhm.
they realistically don't necessarily want to replace their full-time income. They want to go to part-time and do things easier, which any of us that runs a business knows that it's not easier than showing up for a 9 to 5 job. So it's readjusting expectations really, and making sure that we're in full attunement with what it is that we really want, and then the reality of what's required to get that.
Yeah, and I think what you said about the reality of what's required, it's also like tuning out the noise and the fluff that we often see in the online space about like work 4 hours a week and be a bajillionaire. That's not a thing, people. That's not a thing.
Yeah. And anything that you admire, any brand or business, there's probably pretty tired people on the other side of that, right?
Mhm.
There's probably people that have sacrificed a lot of things to make their vision come to life. There's
Mhm.
countless documentaries about founders and visionaries in their spaces that work tirelessly to create their thing. And maybe that's not the path for you. I'm not saying that's the path for everybody, but we have to stop pretending that people that don't necessarily have anything that they've built are giving you advice that is fluff and
Mhm.
not a true depiction of reality, because there's every single example of greatness before us, and it shows hard work and
Yeah.
grit and
Yeah.
determination and unrelentlessness to get there, right?
But
Like a relentless
grit, well, and grit and unrelentlessness and hard work, it's not an easy sell. So, of
no.
course, people are selling you the easy button. But like I tell my clients all the time, like marketers are good at marketing. So if somebody is trying to sell you a marketing easy button, it's a lie. It's a lie. It could work. You could get some results, but it's a little piece of a much bigger puzzle. And strategic planning and the work that you put into your business, it's the exact same thing. Like you can find a plan that works for you. You can work with your strengths and your zone of genius, and you can put parameters in place. But that doesn't ever mean that you're not going to have to do the work, right?
Yes, the work is required. And there are days where you're going to feel like you don't want to, right?
Mhm.
And this kind of ties into a topic that I speak about a lot, which is just like a no plan B mentality.
Mhm.
You decide if you want it and you go for it no matter what, no plan B. And that's, how I live my life. A lot of people that I really look up to, mentors of mine, coaches of mine. And it's
Mhm.
just, there's something different about that. And that's not a very popular thing to talk about online.
Mhm.
Um, but that's also just like the truth and the reality. There's a lot of fakeness out there, as we all know. And
Yeah.
so it's I was having a conversation about this with somebody here in our co-working space earlier, and it's nobody wants to talk about how dirty you get in the process, or like how stuck in the mud you are building your foundation to be able to build the solid thing that you want to build, right?
Yes. Yes. And I love that analogy of a foundation because I even think about like building a house, like building the foundation of a house. That's the dirty part. There's cement, there's mud. It's hard and there's
Yep.
nothing pretty or sexy about it. But
And go ahead.
until you do that part, we're not picking out curtains and light fixtures and paint colors and pretty granite countertops. We got to do the foundation
Yeah.
first.
And some of us are building a one-story house and some of us are building a 100-story building, right? So the foundation looks different too, and the time that it takes looks different too. And so we have to remember that. It doesn't mean that this person's foundation that's building for the long haul and like the multi-level thing is any better than the person building a one-story house. Everybody's called to their own individual things. But where we can where we can be there for each other is being like, you're stuck in the mud. Like, yeah, like I get it. I was there for the longest time and I got so dirty, I didn't even recognize myself anymore. And that's where we can actually build like genuine, authentic conversation to help support each other through it and have those real topics of conversations. Similar with my book, like Shattering Glass, like a lot of people just encourage you, yeah, shatter the glass ceiling, but they don't talk about what happens when you actually uh, go through glass and it hurts and you're bleeding and you're cut from that glass.
Yeah.
And they just expect you not to talk about that part of it because it's not very pretty.
Mhm. Oh my gosh, that is so true. I'm curious, are you familiar with cycle syncing or is that something that you do or teach at
No.
all?
Mm-mm.
So, okay, we're getting really unfiltered here now. Uh, it's syncing your business activities to your menstrual cycle. And that like there's certain things you do during different phases of your cycle because based upon your energy. And I have a birth control like IUD, so I don't get a cycle. So when I hear about it and I hear people talk about it, I'm like, well, that sounds really cool, but like I don't know how to do that. It doesn't work. It wouldn't work for me. But the people that I know that do it say it's like game changing. Like
Yeah.
certain times of the month are better for sales calls. Certain times of the month are better for like speaking and presentations, and then other times are better for like admin and like behind the scenes work and creativity. So because you are so planful, I wondered if you had heard of that.
No, well, I mean, no, I guess little bits maybe I've heard about it and um but I have not ever like tried that or wasn't really even familiar with like the actual terminology around it. But I do think that there is a way to work with your energy levels and actually cultivate that because there are going to be a lot of days where your energy feels off and we have to find a way to like actually access that energy. Everything we need is within us. And so if that's a certain song or a playlist or taking a walk or getting in somewhere physically, like actually changing your physiology to do the hard things that you need to do that you don't want to do, um, we can still create that and cultivate that even on an IUD, even as somebody that maybe is further on in their life and they don't even have a cycle anymore, right? Like there are ways that we can actually create that for ourselves and work within our natural energy flow.
Mhm.
But also, I say that without really studying what you're talking about whatsoever. But for me, that's how I do things, is just understanding and knowing that there are going to be things every single day that I don't want to do, and I
Yeah.
have to do them anyways.
Yeah. And figuring out, to your point, like the things that give you energy, the things that fill your cup. And I love that you have a co-working space for women, because being surrounded by other women who are similarly going after their goals and, can fill you up and energize you. And I know a lot of women who work from home, work for themselves. It can be like, oh, I just cannot sit here in this office anymore or at my kitchen counter or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Go to a coffee shop, go to a co-working space, change your environment, which can
Yeah.
change your energy.
Absolutely. It is. It's literally getting yourself up and moving, even if you can't do that, if you can't go to a coffee shop, or maybe you're on a tight budget and you don't want to put yourself in a place where you'll spend money. Um, Literally moving from your desk to your couch or to a chair or to like just even different places in your home. Again,
Mhm.
changing physiology, going for a quick walk. Those are all ways to create energy. Energy doesn't come from nowhere. It has to be created. There has to be something that like actually cultivates that and creates that friction.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's simulated, right, with like caffeine. But if we want to take it an extra step further, if you notice when you take like pre-workout or caffeine or whatever, and then you like actually go make movement, you create more energy. You get even more jacked up and excited. And it's
Mhm.
not because your coffee is better today than it was yesterday. It's because you're actually having it work with you to create more for yourself too.
Yeah, the momentum. Yeah. The
Yeah.
other thing I was just thinking about of like your energy and creating your energy and managing it is knowing like the things that give you energy and the things that drain you.
Mhm.
And even if there's something that like you really love to do, like I love to speak on podcasts. I love to have people on my show. I love to have these conversations. But I have found if I do more than 3 a day, like the next day I need to do none.
Mhm.
I need that time. And so managing your calendar in terms of the types of activities you do on certain days, like in my mind, everybody in the world should have Calendly. Like none of this we're going back and forth of like, when are you free? When are you free? Here's my Calendly, book a call. And I have
Mhm.
certain calls on certain days because then I manage my schedule so that I have breaks in between. Do you
Yeah,
find that that's helpful?
absolutely. Yeah, really working within a flow that does have like high energy days, like lower energy days where you can pour out the cup, refill the cup, pour out the cup,
Mhm.
refill the cup, right? It's kind of similar in like how that works. When we're expending a ton of energy, we're really like depleting ourselves of a lot of things and having that time to kind of regenerate.
And
Um,
reminding yourself that you're not a robot and you're
I
talking.
am as close to robot as can be, being an extroverted extrovert. And yes, I do. Even robots need to plug in and charge. So,
Yes, yes.
yeah. And so I do think that working within that and like working smarter, like you mentioned, right? Like there's lots of free tools, there's lots of paid for tools. Google has a scheduling thing, for those of you that are just getting started and not wanting to pay. But um, it's so easy to, even in this conversation, listen to what you and I are saying and feel like, oh my God, there's so much I have to do.
Mhm.
And I just really want to encourage whoever's listening that maybe is feeling that way, that let's just go back to, let's look at 2024 and let's start with the fun stuff. Like,
Yes.
what do you need for yourself to feel the most like you?
Mhm.
Is it that once a year family trip? Is it that once a year trip with your partner? Is it a every 3 months you get your hair done? What are the things that you need to make sure that are non-negotiables for you?
Mhm.
Um, and do them and make the time for them. And that's where you start. And come back and listen to this a couple of different times. You're going to hear different things when you're ready for the different parts of this, because we're giving you a lot of the good stuff here today on Unfiltered
Yeah.
Friday.
Yeah.
Um, but that's oftentimes where people get really stuck. Like maybe they don't have the investment to hire somebody like me,
Mhm.
and they're just kind of DIYing it, as most of us do in the very beginning. Start with just some of like the basics and just build from there.
Yeah.
No different than when people are encouraging you, when you're like, start a new morning routine. If you start a new morning routine with 10 different steps that you need to accomplish, it's probably not going to last very long. But if you
Mhm.
start a morning routine with step number one, I just get up early, even if that means it's only 15 minutes early and I'm just sitting there holding my coffee, not knowing why I'm here early. Like, what am I doing? But then maybe the next week, I pick up a book in that extra 15 minutes and I just read a couple of pages and you build from there. And that's what I think is the most important thing is like when you're feeling overwhelmed, just start somewhere and start pretty simple and small because a lot of
And then
momentum is built.
and celebrate the process. Celebrate that you did those small steps and like keep doing them. I mean, so often I coach to this all the time of like process over progress and progress over perfection. And it all goes back to process because if we stick to the process, the progress will come. And so celebrate the process so that you can stick to it.
Yeah. And don't celebrate by self-sabotaging. That's a whole nother podcast we can do on like how we as entrepreneurs self-sabotage ourselves. But
Yeah.
you know, same with if you follow any type of like exercise or diet plan, there's like one rest day, not 7 rest days. There's
Mhm.
one cheat meal or one cheat day, not 7 cheat days. Like you don't want to derail your progress. You want to
Mhm.
celebrate it so that it helps you keep doing more.
Yes.
And so that's a really key thing too.
So true. Oh my gosh, Heather, so good. And you're right. We could totally go in like a whole other direction, have a whole other podcast. But we're gonna wrap up. I've got some fun get to know you questions. And in the like vein of resting, stepping away, taking a break, I always love to ask our guests, what is your current go-to like bingeable TV show or series that you just totally loved that you would recommend for somebody when they need to unplug?
Oh my gosh, my husband and I just started we just finished actually Suits, which I don't know if anybody else talked about that, but yeah. We just finished watching Suits, which was super fun and lighthearted. Sometimes in the binging we've like watched some pretty dark shows, right? Like even some of the really good fun ones like Ozark or you know, I don't know. There's like a lot that can actually be kind of dark. That one has been a really lighthearted like like, you know, everything wraps up in one episode and it's pretty light. It's been
I
really
haven't
good.
watched that one, but I didn't watch it with him, but I've heard it's really good.
It is. It's been very enjoyable, and also just like the outfit inspiration of all the ladies in there is just really.
Yes. Yes. Love that. I love that. I love that. Okay. And then along with your bingeable TV show, what's your current go-to bingeable snack?
Ooh, I swap that out a lot. Bingeable snack. Used to be popcorn before I just found out I had a horrible allergy. So I haven't actually really found a replacement. That's the real honest, unfiltered truth is
I wonder
haven't
if you
found a
can't
replacement for it.
if you can't do popcorn, I want if you could do Pirate's Booty.
It has corn product in it still.
Oh, okay.
But
Anyway,
so anyways, that would be before, and I would like mix in maybe a couple of different like M&Ms or maybe like a little whatever cereal we had on hand, like do a little like trail mix popcorn. I miss
fun.
popcorn so much. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to be on the hunt for a
Yeah.
replacement. Okay, along with your snack, what's your go-to adult beverage and non-adult beverage?
Mm. I am a big bubbly fan. So whether that's alcohol or non-alcohol, bubbles are my favorite. I don't drink very often, but when I do, it's some type of prosecco or sparkling rosé or something on the lighter side. And then my drink of choice, which we call the Heather around here around town, is a sparkling water or club soda with lime and mint leaves. So it feels like a fancy drink and it's got a little of the couple of extra flavors and it's very refreshing and delicious. And so that's my drink of choice.
Yeah, that sounds good. All right. And then I love to always ask about travel. And it sounds
Mm.
like travel is important and something that you prioritize. So I'd love to know either a trip you have planned that you're excited about or somewhere that you traveled recently that you would recommend.
I just got back from Chicago and Michigan, which I really loved. I like big cities, and we just went and saw. I just went and saw a musical when I was in Chicago, and I'm also just a really big fan of water. So whenever I do travel somewhere, it has to be somewhere where I'm like around water, preferably warm because I'm in the Pacific Northwest and it's very cold here. So oftentimes you'll find me at least well once a year you'll find me in Maui. But you know, California beaches, I don't discriminate against nice warm beaches.
Yes, I love it. Oh my gosh. Well, Heather, this was so much fun. Let our listeners know if they'd like to connect with you, learn more, where you hang out online and how they can connect.
Yeah, Instagram is my happy place. You can follow our co-working space at Her Connection Hub at she.leads.me, which will have more info on topics like we talked about today, my upcoming book called Shattering Glass. And that's the best spot to find me right now is Instagram.
Awesome. Well, I love it. Thank you again so much for being here. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.